What? Fuck's sake,
book.
Ashleigh.
A book.
For fuck's sake. Hello, everybody, and a very time of day appropriate salutation to you. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever it is, and welcome to What the Trans.
What the trans?
What the Trans, it's us.
Hiya.
And I am Ashleigh, and with me is Flint.
Hello.
How you doing? What's new?
Doing okay, vibing, moving. So recently, listeners, you won't see this. My hair is not green currently.
Yes.
I shaved it because honestly, my hair's been getting long. I've just had some irritation on my scalp, and I wanted to shave it for my 30th birthday, and so I did that. And I decided to just go full, straight to the skull and let it grow out for a little bit and let my scalp settle. And it's been doing it wonders. It's a rare, less green me. I've been okay. I had the funniest and possibly best doctor's appointment of my life recently, outside of whenever I get my top surgery done, because I shit you not, I have been prescribed raving as medication.
Seriously?
For real? Serious? This is not a bit. This is not a joke. I have been prescribed raving.
Okay, you're going to have to walk me through this.
We'll two-step through it. So I went to, I had my first appointment with a doctor about my Ehlers-Danlos, the hypermobile, that fun stuff,
Yes.
the whole loosey-goosiness. And she said, first off, just tell me about you. What do you do? What do you get up to? And I was like, well, in terms of physical activity, the most I do is a dog walk when I can. And, if I can make it out to a rave, I actually find dancing is one of the most helpful physical things I can do, because you can do it very minimally or you can do it as much as you want. If I can only bop my shoulders, I can only bop my shoulders. If I can do more, I can do more. She was like, oh, do you do that in the house and round about? And I was like, yeah. I've got, I actually recently have got my decks out so that I can mix, because it's recently my birthday. And she was like, oh, fantastic, amazing. So what I've found is that usually it's way less effective to give people exercises to do and things to add into their daily routine. We're normally best off just finding what people naturally do, encouraging that, and then seeing where we get from there. So I'm just going to suggest that you, a few times in a week, just make sure to put on music and just, dance as much as you kind of can or want. Don't push yourself really hard. Don't really try super difficult stuff. Just feel your body and kind of just get into a good rhythm of doing that consistently. If that's okay with you, if you're right with that. Now, are you fucking joking? I'm being prescribed donk. I'm having a medication of Lakina. I am living my life free and high right now. So
Put a donk on it.
A banging donk on it.
Put a donk on it. The doctor said so.
Medical donk.
Medical donk. It was the best. Genuinely.
I'm going to have to tell the rest of St. Lucifer about this, because I'm still in the group chat, but we use the phrase put a donk on it and, donk this and whatever. That's a phrase that comes up in the band, right?
Yeah.
And so they will be delighted to hear about the concept of a medical donk.
Medical, yeah, truly. Other than that, I've been, as I said, mixing, and I've been playing some games. I've got a game pre-ordered for the first time ever, and I played it on release, and it's Coffee Talk, and it's very cute. And then I've been playing Dragon Age Veilguard, which is less cute, but very, very fun. How are you doing? Now I've rambled. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I had a bunch of stuff. I say this every time. I had a bunch of stuff thinking, oh, well, I'll mention this and I'll mention this and I'll mention this. Can't remember any of it. So I will mention something that might be obvious to you, dear listener. We don't have Alex this week. Alex is taking a little break from the podcast for a number of reasons, which we're not going to go into because it's not our place to do that. So, yes, for the moment, you've just got myself and delightful Flint.
Everything's absolutely fine with Alex, by the way. It's all good vibes. She's literally just taking some time out to chill, because we all deserve that at some point, since she's worked at the pod for so long and so consistently. So, we wish her well, and as soon as she's back, you'll know and hear about it. So tell me about Avowed.
Avowed is a good game. It's from Obsidian, who are the people that made The Outer Worlds and Fallout New Vegas, which is good if there's any trans people listening.
Would there be?
One or
Possibly,
two, perhaps.
maybe, I don't
Yes,
know.
maybe.
We've never really done much outreach with that kind of community, have we?
It's not a completely new IP. It's set in the IP of a game that was published like in the 90s or possibly the early 2000s, fucking ages ago, right? And it's this, fun, fresh, self-contained adventure, and you're an envoy of a fantastical empire, and you arrive on the shores of this other place, and there's some weird shit going down, and you've got to get to the bottom of the weird shit and try and sort it out, essentially, which I'm sure that's exactly how it's described on the back of the game box. I played it when it first came out. I thought it was brilliant. It was one of those games that I played it once and then immediately played it again, but slightly differently. So I started playing it again recently because I saw that it had a bunch of new stuff added to it. So you can play as various different races. There's a couple of different tweaks and things, a couple of quality of life improvements. And I'm like, aha, wonderful. I'm going to go and play that again because I'd completely forgotten about it. Right? It was one of those games that I played it, I enjoyed it, I thought it was brilliant. And then as soon as I finished playing it, I completely forgot it existed. So maybe it wasn't the best game I'd ever played, but I had a lot of fun with it. It's one of those games where you've got the option to be a mage or use guns or be a gun mage.
Ooh.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's really good. I enjoyed it.
In Veilguard, the class that I've been playing has been a mage, like necromancer, because that's the green magic, and it's really cool. I was really enjoying the character customizer on it. I was enjoying playing it today until a certain government decided to put a load of things up upon its web pages that now we'll have to sit and blabber about over the next few weeks, but we can't even do that right now because news. So, in the meanwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a thing, you're probably aware of it by the time this comes out. Obviously the EHRC and their long awaited guidance, that's dropped, but it dropped as we're talking about this now, sitting chatting to each other online. Sorry, in our studio that we definitely have.
Yep.
That happened 2 hours ago. So we just haven't had time to go into it. And to the extent that we've wondered, do they do this on purpose? Just to spite us. But no, it's because they're going off on a recess and they don't want anybody calling them out on their bullshit.
Yeah. They'll wait until all of the anger and emotions have simmered down a little bit over summer. And then when they're there and actually having to make responses and things, there'll be, less to respond to. So if hearing that kind of annoys you and you want to do something about it or get involved somehow, how about we take a jaunt down Action Alley?
Let's do it. It's my favourite thoroughfare.
Hey.
So, firstly, we'll come back to the EHRC stuff, but GATE, Guiders Against Trans Exclusion, and the Trans Solidarity Alliance, TSA, remember that acronym, that's going to come up again, are doing a letter writing campaign during the parliamentary recess. Now, you can actually buy a postcard that they will write a custom message on and send that to your MP. Now, unbelievably, GATE and TSA are letting you do that for free, but just a £1 donation or tip at the checkout will help cover their costs. So, chip in, which seems reasonable, really, rather than demanding, here you go, you do all the work. So the goal is to make sure that MPs have a ton of physical mail waiting for them at their office when they come back to work on the 1st of June. So there's a couple of different designs of postcards that are available on the site, which you can buy and colour and send yourself. But, you do have the option to get them to do all the difficult stuff for you. But yeah, physical mail, that's where it's at, folks.
It then just says EHRC specific actions. We will obviously get further into the weeds of recent shenanigans as much as we can with, the brief Doppler effect level of look-throughs that we've been able to get at it. There is also, as ever, our wonderful website. We will be updating on our socials, various actions and things that will be coming up. Obviously, there is the page on our website maintained by the wonderful Christina. So, keep in the loop.
Stay up to date. That's kind of our whole thing. That's what we're here for, is to try and keep people in the loop. So let's do that. Let's get into that loop, shall we? Maybe there'll be some tales from it. So firstly, let's do with our standard thing and take a brief little hop over the pond.
Pond hopping, we're hopping across the pond. How bad could it be?
Welcome to Colorado, listeners. You can tell it's different because of all of the ambient Coloradese noise. So this story takes a little bit of setting up because it's another court case, but don't worry, it's a good one this time. Back in December 2025, our least favourite fortunate son with a literal worm in his actual brain, current Secretary for Health and Human Services Robert F. Kennedy, issued a declaration saying that hospitals that provided gender-affirming care for trans youth could be excluded from federal healthcare programs like Medicaid and Medicare, which most hospitals rely on to be able to stay open and, providing healthcare. He also claimed that gender-affirming care was, quote, neither safe nor effective. I'm just going to point out right now that this thing that he said it on was not a law, it wasn't a court order, there was no instant legal backing, it was just a statement. I mention this here because foreshadowing is a narrative device. Children's Hospital Colorado ended its gender-affirming care program in January, one of around 40 hospitals in the US that gave in to the Trump administration and shuttered their programs providing trans youth care, at which point 4 trans youths and their families sued under the Colorado Anti-Discrimination Act. A district court judge in Denver found that the families, legally speaking, had a point. The judge agreed that the families could probably prove that they were discriminated against and that the youths faced irreparable harm, but denied them any relief anyway. The logic behind that ruling was that by forcing the hospital to provide gender-affirming care, it would leave the door open for significant retaliation from the federal government, which could cause the entire hospital system to close. So it's a very utilitarian way of thinking about it, but okay. The families then took their case to the Colorado Supreme Court. Now, between that Denver decision and the state Supreme Court taking a look at the case, something very important happened. A federal judge vacated Robert Kennedy's original declaration about hospitals providing gender-affirming care. I'm not going to spend too long talking about this federal case, but the final written ruling for it is absolutely glorious and made it clear that the federal judge, Mustafa T. Kusubhai, has absolutely zero fucks to give about Kennedy's little blog post. As well as essentially telling Kennedy to sod off with that bullshit, the ruling also blocks any future attempts to reimpose any, quote, materially similar policy. So the Trump administration can't just rename and rephrase the declaration and try again. All in all, this ruling is very satisfying to read in spots, and you can find a really good article about it from back in April on, of course, Erin in the Morning, which we'll put a link to in our show notes, because we're saying the word link again. So, with that little diversion out of the way, let's head back to Colorado, where a few days ago the state Supreme Court ruled 5-2 that the Children's Hospital Colorado, or CHC, had to start providing gender-affirming care to trans youth again. In the decision, the hospital's defence that it hadn't discriminated against the trans youths, it had simply just stopped offering one category of treatment, was considered to be meaningless, because, you guessed it, they were still offering the exact same kinds of treatment to cis youngsters while denying them to trans ones. Quote, even without analysing the disparate treatment between transgender and cisgender youth, CHC's policy to suspend providing medical gender-affirming care explicitly discriminates against patients because of their gender identity, and with this in mind, they rule that the trans youth had indeed been discriminated against and that this was illegal under Colorado state law. Another plank in CHC's defence was the aforementioned idea that if they had continued to provide gender-affirming care, they'd have been defunded to smithereens by the federal government, and that the hospital had only been sticking by the terms of the Kennedy Declaration, about which the court had this to say, quote, Although CHC acted reluctantly and expressed no animus towards transgender patients, the action it chose to take in response to the Kennedy Declaration specifically targeted transgender youth patients. The Kennedy Declaration may have influenced CHC's decision, but it doesn't absolve CHC of responsibility. Hammering this point home, they also wrote that a quote-unquote reluctant act of discrimination that had been compelled by a third party is still an act of discrimination under Colorado law. And finally, in what's been described as the most significant part of the ruling, the court also fired shots at that original district court finding, saying, quote, "The trial court's concern about opposing the public interest by ordering CHC to violate federal law is also misplaced. Why? Because the Kennedy Declaration isn't federal law. This means that federal threats that aren't backed up by any actual legislation do not override a state's laws." Boom! So yeah, nice one, Colorado Supreme Court.
Hell yeah. It's nice to have some sanity.
Yeah, and such vociferously applied sanity, because, you know, asking why because the Kennedy Declaration isn't federal law, that wasn't us editorializing. That bit is in the quote, right? So, you know, they were very strongly in favor of upholding state anti-discrimination law.
Yeah.
So that's a relief, I think.
It's heartwarming.
And those 4 families must have been through absolute, you know, absolute heck and back, as people said a few years ago. So, yeah, but those 4 families, fantastic. Well done. Fair play to them.
Yeah.
And they must be so relieved.
Yeah. I think the thing that gets me about this case is the fact that we are seeing all the time treatments that are still being provided for cis people and cis children being stopped for trans children. And you've never seen people properly, genuinely engage with that. I've never really seen a court genuinely properly engage with how are you doing this to one group and not another when it's the same treatment. To see that properly challenged and properly put forth of like, no, you absolutely cannot do that, is good. It's fantastic. Thank fuck.
Turns out making a legal ruling about something and being quite strongly worded in doing so is fine and good, actually.
Yeah.
So let's do that thing that we've kind of alluded to already.
We don't want to bury the lead any longer than we have. We'll let pond hopping be where pond hopping normally is, but we're obviously gonna have to dress. Yeah, we're dressing the elephant in the room that is the HRC, and it's apparently only allowed 3 fucking articles of gendered clothing in its opposite gender, whatever the fuck. Right, okay. The guidance, or to give it its full name, the Draft Code of Practice for Services, Public Functions and Associations, is a big document covering how to interpret the Equality Act 2010 in various circumstances. And when we say big, we mean like over 300 pages, I think, is it not?
Yeah, 346, I want to say.
Yeah, too much. And, of course, last year's UK Supreme Court ruling reinterpreted how sex is defined in the Equality Act too. Phillipson, the Equalities Minister of the UK, promised the guidance would be laid before Parliament and published this May. Once the guidance is laid before Parliament, there are 40 days before it automatically comes into effect. Those 40 days exclude any period of 4 or more days where either house is not sitting. So, you know, the recess that's going to be happening literally like the second after they dropped it.
Like right now.
Don't worry, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. Because it's been laid on the day of recording, 21st of May, the 40-day timer will end on 9th of July. So we can spend all of Pride season talking about it. Isn't that fun?
Lucky us!
So obviously, because the guidance has been published, what the trans and other trans groups will be doing our best to read it, digest it, dissect it, all of that stuff, and communicate it, and how it'll affect trans people. You can obviously, as we said earlier, mail your MP some specific concerns about the release guidance and instruct them to call for both a debate and a vote on the subject. And I know hearing the word debate can be a little bit jarring, but, you know, literally debate in terms of the only way to stop this would be a parliamentary debate. And we should do this because, well, unless there is enough pressure, the guidance will just automatically come into effect without discussion. So, you know, we've got to fight for the future we want, I guess. What do we know so far? Well, we are still crawling over all the full details of this, and rest assured, we will give a full breakdown as best we can on the next episode. If you're disappointed we've not been able to do it already, then we are sorry. Like we said, this has dropped like an hour before recording. But right from the off, what we've got to say is, there are a few contradictions in here, or one or two instances where it's going to be really easy to assume the worst because of the way that everything's phrased. We are not going to rush into any judgment right now. We can't. We've not had the time, and we're sure that that's why they've left it until the end of the day, so that charities and trans organisations don't have time to meaningfully respond to it before the MPs go on their recess, which they'll already be on by the time that this episode's in your ears. So if we pick one aspect of it to talk about here and now, then we'll just be cherry picking, and we are not TERFs, so we don't do that. As we mentioned, MPs have 40 days to decide what to do with this draft guidance, which does not include that recess. So the critical date to remember is July 9th. That's the end of the 40-day period. So plenty of time to get out some nice paper, write an actual physical letter to your MP. We've also heard that Trans Solidarity Alliance may try and coordinate another mass lobby event to actually meet your MP in the physical realm of meet space. Although, as ever, with any level of communication with your MP, your mileage may vary. Some will be more receptive than others. So before our next episode comes out, which is where we'll hopefully have a full breakdown here, there will absolutely be other organisations doing the same. We will be sharing these out over the coming days, so please keep an eye on our social media, catch them, keep yourself informed. But also, you don't have to do what we tell you. If you need to come up for air from all of this, then that's entirely understandable. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Look after yourselves first. Genuinely. If Alex is able to take time off right now when all big news is going on, you can. Chill. It's okay. We will get through this. So, hi, Future Flint here. Since recording that last night and the next day, here, hi, hello, there have been a couple of organisations that have responded. But we have a couple here for you now that we've spotted and we wanted to highlight because, we want to have something more to say than what we do, but as we say, we don't have enough time for us to go through it in the way that we would like. What has been said and by who? Well, the Good Law Project have put out a What You Need to Know article, which goes through some of the specifics, including how some of the worst parts of previous guidance that people were concerned about didn't make it into this code of practice, which is good. But they still overall, state that it isn't good enough, that this is exclusionary and it's harmful to trans people in many ways. Trans Solidarity Alliance's top lines are similar. They say that overall the code is pushing public bodies and spaces to exclude trans people. It's normalising the vibes-based gender policing that you can boil down to a don't ask, don't tell, and that it doesn't protect businesses from potential lawsuits. They even go far as calling it Labour's bathroom ban, which stand, but I do not disagree at all. We're going to link to, obviously, both of those bits of reporting. Whilst this isn't past Parliament, like we said, there is very little chance it won't be. Truly, it's pretty much a formality. However, like we said, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So, to that end, it means that we have to get active about this and get consistent about it. As we've mentioned, TSA are doing another mass lobby at Parliament, and we cannot encourage you enough to go. You may be thinking, what's the point when it'll go through? Well, because we have to exert pressure. People pressure is one of the few tools that we have. Well, we have more tools than what powers that be might like us to believe, but it is a tool that we have, and it's one that we sometimes sleep on. We can create a body of evidence of continued dissatisfaction and show that we will not back down. If we can show that it is more hassle to hurt us than it is to back us, then we can get somewhere. Some MPs probably met their first ever trans person at the last lobby that they held. And some of the work and the conversations had that day and following may have already meant that some MPs understand more about this code than they would have if people hadn't turned up. And if last year's record can be broken, then it may seriously help set us up for a future where we get better than the shit we're currently being served. So please, wherever you are, try to make it down. It will be the 24th of June, Parliament. We will update you more as it comes in. But save the date. We're even going to try and get down as much as we can as well.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, there's just a Blue Sky post that I just want to highlight real here because says in like 4 lines what it just took us 4 paragraphs to say. And this is from Innismuk on Blue Sky. As ever, for trans people, when there's alarming news, remember that transphobes want you afraid and hopeless. Seek out expert analysis rather than the worst possible consequences. Disengage when you can, and read more only when you're in a good position to do so. Protect yourself and your comrades. The fact that the transphobes want us afraid and hopeless, it's the absolute crux of it for me.
Yes.
They really want that. Like, after the Supreme Court dropped, there was some confusion expressed some weeks later that, well, why haven't they just given up? They're still carrying on. They're still fighting. Why? You know, we've won already. It's like, well, no, you haven't.
Yeah.
Like, they will keep putting the pressure on because they think it works, and we need to show them that no, it fucking doesn't.
Yeah. Like, whatever you do, you know, whether you immediately get into action and doing things, whether you take time out and chill out, no matter what you do, don't give up. That's all it is, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, make sure that you are taking care of yourself. Your survival is going to matter more than anything else.
Really good way of putting it. Your survival matters much more than your ability to read a document.
Yeah, you know? Fucking
right. or desire to do
God,
so.
If only I had to actually internalize that messaging when I was doing my dissertation.
Yeah. So obviously more on this next time, and we love you. We do. Look after yourselves, because it's gonna be a bit rough over the next couple of weeks. Mostly from people kind of overreacting to it and saying, well, this means this and this means this, and that might not necessarily be the case. People might be going off all half-cocked. Well, by the time you hear this, the worst of that's going to be over, isn't it? If, like, particularly people going off about it in the first few hours of it having been released. But by the time you listen to this, it's going to have been like 4 days ago for you.
It's likely that there's still going to be a lot of waving this around as a victory flag.
Yeah.
And that is not necessarily, like, that's not to say this isn't bad. Of course, like, obviously, you know, I'm aware the sky's blue, you know what I mean? Grass is green, I've got it down. Transphobes will still dress this up in the reality that is the absolute most harmful to you, regardless of what the document says. So don't trust it unless it's actual lawyers that you know genuinely operate from a place of understanding human rights law, as opposed to dickheads with loud mouths on the internet.
Yeah.
Probably us included in that as well.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Don't listen to us. We're idiots.
Yeah. We just find things.
Yes. Find things and bring them to you like a knight to his liege lord.
Or like a cat when it brings you a dead mouse.
Yeah,
some
exactly.
Sort of gesture of goodwill.
Exactly.
And you're like, great, a corpse. Why?
Thank you. Love it.
We're teaching you how to hunt.
Okay.
Right.
Let's move on to the next story, which is a little bit more fun because this is the story where the title right next to it is Bye-Res! Since support for Starmer's depleting, he and Streeting had a brief meeting. We're glad Streeting's yeeting away from those he's mistreating, but the joy itself is quick fleeting. So, yes, all this to say, Wesley Streeting has resigned his role as Health Secretary. Celebratory noises. So, we're going to get into it, but another quick bit of poetry. Some may worry about a hypothetical Streeting premiership, but given how he is less popular than Harmer Starmer, there should be little trouble in defeating Streeting. It is widely speculated, of course, that Streeting resigned because he is planning to take a run at Starmer and become Prime Minister. However, as our fun little rhyme hinted at, we're not sure it's going to go Streeting's way. It looks like he may be opposed in any potential leadership bid by none other than the King in the North, Andy Burnham. Labour MP Josh Simons, MP for Makerfield in sunny Wigan, has stepped down to allow Burnham to stand for Parliament, but in order to succeed in his bid to replace Starmer, Burnham would need to win the Makerfield seat in a by-election and then win the Labour leadership contest. Also, fun fact, Makerfield is the constituency that covers the area where I went to college. Double also fun fact, Reform seem to be taking a page out of the Green Party's playbook, which is presumably printed on recycled paper, and are standing a candidate in the Makerfield by-election who is also a plumber. Now, Byline Times have done a deep dive into said candidate's social media history, which is of an extremely predictable nature. So if you're interested, you can find that in our show notes on the website. Byline Times are great. Give them a follow or a subscription if you're a bougie like me. So we're not going to get fully into the details of any potential Labour leadership contest, because that's somewhat beyond the scope of this podcast. So let's talk about Streeting's replacement as Health Secretary, James Murray. So we kind of don't really know all of that much about Murray. He's a member of LGBT Labour, lives in London with his husband Tom, and in 2022 he was able to say, trans women are women. But in recent years, he's been rather quiet on LGBT rights, or at least where he has spoken, he's regrettably been towing the party line. So we have contacted the Department for Health and Social Care asking if Murray has any particular vision for trans healthcare, but at the time of writing, we have of course received no response. If you're one of Murray's constituents in Ealing North, maybe get in touch and ask him about trans healthcare. Also, while we're here and just real quick, a BBC article that we looked at during the writing of this story has some absolute moon logic going on. Quote, Wes Streeting had the knack of displaying empathy and understanding of people's health challenges and frustration at NHS failings and delays. Sorry, Wes Streeting had the knack of displaying empathy and understanding? Are you fucking kidding? When exactly did he do that, right? Citation very much needed there, I think, BBC. We'll come back to that article, but James Murray has had precisely the sort of career that you would expect. He's kind of flown, kept his head beneath the parapet, and had literally the career progression for most kinds of MP now. He started as a special advisor, then worked under different MPs, became an MP himself, and now he's at Department for Health. So yeah, but how about Wes Streeting has a knack of displaying empathy and understanding?
Aye. Oh, wow. I hadn't seen that quote. I had missed that. In the flurry of everything that's been going on, I totally missed seeing that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I know.
Wow. If this person truly believes that this is the facts of the universe that they're living, then this may be the first Mandela effect that I will actually believe. That there is a parallel universe out there somewhere where Streeting is capable of empathy. Unfortunately, that's not this one. It's not this one. So better luck next time. Like, the thing is with gaslighting is that you have to actually be able to like convince someone that the other reality is true.
Yeah.
This is delirious.
100%.
You just said things as if those words put together mean anything in context to the human that we have seen do the things that he has done. I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm actually I'm getting giddy. I'm giddy from stress.
So, fun times. Let's see how the leadership election goes. It's not 100% been confirmed that's what's happening. But yeah, that's what's happening, really. Fingers crossed, and I suspect quite likely Streeting is going to fucking lose.
Okay, so we've successfully poked enough fun at Wes. Next up, Cass! Well, kinda. Somewhat kinda. It's actually not even our fun. I say fun. It's not even our jabs to poke. It's the British Medical Association's. A long-awaited response to the Cass review has finally been published by the British Medical Association. It was first announced all the way back in August 2024, so they've been cooking this one up for a while. It's not a slam dunk of a document, right? You know, but there's a few things we can take issue with, including the actual design of the BMA's review itself, the limited extent to which it disagrees with Cass, and the fact that it makes no particular recommendation regarding trans healthcare. Despite that, the BMA review is interesting and potentially useful for being an authoritative source that points out problems with trans healthcare. Crucially, it acknowledges that trans healthcare is not being managed like other healthcare, and in the years since the Cass review, healthcare for trans young people has gotten worse. For example, gender identity and development services closed while its replacements were not fully operational. Some promised clinics are still yet to open. Changes to both the law and NHS policy have removed access to trans healthcare in a manner that departs from usual UK clinical practice. And the promised access to blockers via a research programme is still yet to materialise. In short, restrictions on care have been prioritised, whilst research and support were not. Reflecting on some of what we just summarised for you, the BMA review says, quote, "A key question for policymakers is asking whether they regard these actions as defensible." Strong words there, but despite highlighting the lack of care and implying that recent decisions are not defensible, the BMA stopped short of recommending what should be done about the situation. Instead, the review sort of flounders on the topic of how clinicians can have differences of opinions whilst managing uncertainty. And if you want a cynical take, the BMA review expresses concern that the unprecedented overreach in curtailing trans care has limited the autonomy of doctors to make decisions for trans patients, while trans people are still begging to be allowed autonomy over their own bodies. So, thoughts?
Didn't go far enough, right? When this was approved, when the BMA voted to do a review of the CAS review, essentially, I remember us being quite optimistic on the podcast. I remember us saying, okay, so this has been voted for by the doctors who disagree with the CAS review, and they're going to read it the Riot Act, as it were, put a few holes in an already sinking ship, or I wish it was sinking. Put a few holes in it anyway. But then that... other doctors within the BMA, you get the impression the older ones pushed back against that and said, well, I think they declawed the ability of the anti-CAS doctors. I'm explaining this very, very poorly because I just can't get the timeline right in my head. But it was voted for in August 2024, and sometime in 2025, there was something else done to that vote whereby a group within the BMA said, oh, well, yeah, but we're not going to be reviewing this, or this.
There were other votes that limited what the scope of the actual review would be after the vote was done to review the review.
Yeah, essentially. Or at least a policy or so. Yeah, something was decided that declawed the ability of this review of the review to actually really push anything. Although I'm glad that they've made it in there that there is some criticism, as there should be. So I'm glad that that's in there, because it'd be very difficult to make a review of the CAS review without mentioning that it was, little bit problematic. Those are my thoughts, such as they are. Not very organised. I apologise.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it went far enough. And it's a shame. It's a shame when you hope that something's going to work out and it just kind of doesn't. I think for me, it's the fact that you aren't suggesting anything.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to critique something, you want to point out the problems with the effects of certain things, then give some idea, give some suggestion.
Yeah.
At least state, the obvious in the bit. But they don't seem to do that. So, what do you want to change from it? What is the future that you want to see for trans people, other than doctors having more ability to make decisions over their bodies? Because they said that one of the only things they were really critical on is that these decisions stop doctors from being able to make as many decisions about trans people's bodies, as if trans people aren't involved,
which we're not really, as a rule. I wonder if any trans people in the BMA, if there are any, I'm sure there must be, participated in this review. I
think one of the things that is unfortunate about it is it feels like they've made it really easy to ignore. And if they had done this properly, or if they had done this in a way that really showcased the reality that so many of us are living in, it wouldn't be that easy to ignore. Anyway, speaking of things trying really hard to grab your attention, I guess, do you want to get into the next one?
Yes, I do. And it's just a quick one because this itself dropped only a couple of days, or I think the day before we started recording. So real quick, news has surfaced that the UK government is to host a European Ida Hobbit event in 2027. So when news of this surfaced, we all just figuratively looked at each other in confusion and said, wait, what? For realsies? Are they serious? And it turns out that, yes, they are. Idaho is, of course, the International Day against homophobia, biphobia, intersex phobia, and transphobia, and has been gaining traction over the last few years, hence governments wanting to get in on the action now. Last year's was in Copenhagen, this year's will apparently be in London, for some damn reason. So from the government website, we have this little nugget. Quote, the UK announces a funding package of £21 million to advance global LGBT plus rights through civil society partnerships. So, any chance of something like 20 million being spent a little closer to home? Maybe?
Arms for the poor.
On things like standing up to trans derangement syndrome in the press? Or getting an actual trans-inclusive conversion therapy ban through, as has been promised at least 8 times now?
Hell, how many people's hormones do you think that could buy?
Like quite a lot of cis people, as well as every trans person on the list, and probably quite a few for the next few years, I would imagine, because it's not like HRT costs very much. Anyway, so it's unlikely that the rest of the Europeans who've decided on this are completely unaware of all of the problems with LGBTQ plus rights here in jolly old Blighty. So I look forward to some spicy speeches and press statements at the very least when the event takes place next May. Finally, this absolutely represents an opportunity for us. We can pressure the UK and different European governments over it, we can physically protest the event itself, or we can do what we did with the Tory government's Safe to Be Me conference and try and get it pulled entirely before it even takes place. Options! Looking forward to travelling to London with my best protest signs and standing around outside.
The UK is trying to pinkwash itself.
Absolutely. That's
what it is.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it is. The UK, a destination which has been plunging lower and lower every year in the ILGA Rainbow Map rankings, right? It's just getting worse and worse every year. 10 years ago, we were at the very top, right? Where Iceland is now, that was us. We were leading the charge. And now we're down, like on trans rights, we're down near places like Romania and Hungary and Russia. Obviously, it's a bit better with it when it comes to everything else, but we're concerned about trans rights. So that's what I'm going to lead with.
Yeah. And you know what else it reminds me of? It reminds me of the World Pride in Washington situation. That was like, okay, why were they offered that? Why are you setting up this way when like it's kind of dangerous. Like it's dangerous times to be traveling while trans and queer.
Indeed.
I'm not sure if this is the same thing because obviously this is an event which looks like it's sort of a G7 summit type thing as opposed to a, World Pride.
It's not a pride.
But, it's still that thing of how much can I trust that you're paying attention to what's happening here?
Yeah, right.
If you choose to have this conversation here, unless you're using it as an example to corner them and go, "Oi, what are you doing? Stop it."
I really hope it's that, but as you say, we're not going to know until next year which way they're going to go with it, And I really do hope they are going to use it as a teachable moment and shame the government of the day. Let's check out our favourite part of the room, our favourite little corner.
Yes, well, okay, do you remember that trope in old cartoons where, the protagonist gets a small win against the bad guy, kind of gets a pie in their face or something, and then the bad guy tries to, get his own back only to be met with, instant karma? Well, we have a rare sequel to a previous Loser's Corner, which is another Loser's Corner! So, it is a familiar face with a funny name, the case of Giggle for Girls versus Miss Roxanne Tickle. Whimsily named Giggle v Tickle, something every law student in Australia is likely thanking the stars for, because it'll be a damn sight harder to forget than your average case law. And, considering it's the first case of its kind to reach Australian Federal Court, it's quite the landmark too. So, why are we talking about it again? Well, first, because it's been a while, about 2 years in fact, since the initial judgment even happened and we last spoke about it, let's quickly re-establish the facts. Giggle for Girls is a social media app designed specifically for women to connect, and you have to be approved by sending in a picture of yourself. Roxanne did just that and was accepted before being banned later on in September 2021. And for anyone thinking this is some admin gone rogue, this review and ban came from the app founder herself, Sal Grover. Ew! Now, Tickle did the boldest move and took them to court, as she should, and she won on the basis that she was indirectly discriminated against as a transgender woman and was owed 10,000 Australian dollars in damages from the app. Sal Grover, not one to realise when she's beat apparently, lodged an appeal to the judgment to try and get it overturned. And you know what? The initial judgment was set aside, because the Court of Appeal found that actually this case didn't just meet the criteria for indirect discrimination, it fit the criteria for direct discrimination. The court then doubled the damages that Giggle and Groveler needed to pay, bringing the total up to 20,000 Australian dollars. This isn't just tasty to hear. This is some really important precedent being set. This is the first time the updated Sex Discrimination Act has been tested in Australian court, and the first time a case about discrimination based on gender identity has been heard in federal court in Australia too. So I hope that Tickle will be able to finally get some rest now, because one would hope that if the giggler over there has been shamed twice now, the third one is just going to look like she enjoys spending lots of money to be told off.
Hey, I mean, we're not here to yuck another person's yum. Whatever lights your candle. But also, this case is pretty funny, isn't it? not just because of that extremely memorable name.
No, it's phenomenal. Good on Roxanne.
Yeah,
genuinely, it's fantastic work. And there was a quote that she put in that was in one of the articles that I saw about this initially in the first judgment, where she said, this has taken up 3 years of my life now. And that was with the initial judgment. So I couldn't help but think of that when I was writing this. And I was like, God, it's even more time, because that was in 2024. We're 2 years on, 5 years now of having to handle this. And that's just awful. So I hope it's done with. I hope she can literally just crack on with whatever she's doing and wants to do.
With an extra $20,000.
With an extra flush pocket. We love it. We love it.
Yeah. I think it's main course time.
For the meat, we've got a real treat for you, because it is truly hard not to get into queer theory or trans news without coming across our interviewee's work. From theory to research to direct action, she's literally done it all. She's even credited as coining the term genderqueer. And she is here to talk to us about her new book coming out called Let's Not Talk About Transgender Sex, The Erotic Erasure of Trans Desire and Sexuality, which is coming out on the 28th of May, 2026, which is, a couple of days from when this is being presented to you. And this is very cool, very exciting. And I will take it away to the wonderful, fantastic Ricky Wilchins. Welcome to the pod. Please let the people know who you are and what you're up to.
My name is Ricky Wilchins. I'm an author and activist. I won't give myself a long introduction. I like to think of myself as someone who needs no introduction. Often I just go by my first name because I'm so famous, like people like Cher, Bono, and Daffy. But I'll answer the full name, Ricky Wilchins, as well. Thank you for having me.
It's honestly an absolute honor to meet you. I really want to talk first about the book that you have coming out. I'm curious as to why you turned to the topic of sex for this latest publication. Are there any specific motivations or inspirations behind that?
Yes, I've had sex several times.
Brilliant.
So I was interviewing, I won't use their names, but a couple that's very highly placed in trans studies in New York, of all places, which, is the center of all knowledge in the Western world. And we got talking about sex and the fact that I was going to do this book, and two things stood out. One is that when I started talking about writing about sex, the husband immediately said to me, it'll be used against us, which I think is, part of the operative fear that, keeps us from writing about this. And I'm sure that point. But the second part was that his wife was about to undergo surgery and was terrified both of them were about what the results would be. They had no idea what to expect post-operatively in terms of how her vaginoplasty would perform and what it would do and what she would be able to feel and what he'd be able to do and so forth. And, unfortunately, my knowledge of this is extremely old because my surgery was in 1980. But I just kind of gave them a download of everything that's, kind of happened with me since surgery sexually and how things worked out and what worked and what didn't. And, but it struck me that, here are people that are extremely connected and are extremely sophisticated and well-read, and they have exactly the same questions and areas of ignorance that I had 50 years ago, which is completely insane. And I realized the reason is that trans people don't write about sex. Trans studies doesn't write about sex. Queer theory doesn't write about sex. They write about sexuality with a capital S as a concept, but they don't write about sex. And this just made no sense to me. So that kind of touched off a whole series of events. One of the things that I did was I myself look, I should say at the outset, I'm extremely happy with my surgery. It didn't come without a few wrinkles, but basically, the equipment works pretty much as listed. But not everybody is so fortunate. And I have to say, even when it quote unquote works, I still struggle to this day, and I just turned 74, with the fact that I have a different genital on my body than I was born with. And yet I'm expected to whip this out during sex with intimate partners and somehow, hopefully, even have an orgasm with or at least pleasure. That's a huge accomplishment, And I thought, we don't know anything about this. We know nothing about how trans women actually adapt to having a vagina in their body that didn't used to live there. And I just thought this is a fascinating subject. And since I wrestle with it myself, less and less, but it's still there. I thought this should be a book. So I simply just started, did what they call a snowball sample and just started interviewing trans women who would talk with me. It wasn't a huge sample, and it certainly wasn't representative, but it was a really interesting sample. And one woman who I hate to this day can have orgasms from thinking about it.
Wow.
I can't tell you how convenient that would be when I was sitting in the dentist chair, waiting for the Novocaine to take over, or on long flights to Europe. So I'm very unhappy with her. Another one is what's called, I have found, a Salmasian, meaning they had the vaginoplasty, but also kept the disco stick, which I thought was fascinating. And then we have just a whole bunch of just, garden variety people who went through, what used to be called sex change surgery and what we're now supposed to call gender confirmation surgery. So it was just really interesting, and I was so grateful to people for actually, opening up their hearts and just telling me their stories. And that should be coming out hopefully in time for Pride or shortly thereafter from Riverdale Avenue Books. I'm insanely proud of the title because I couldn't come up with it. And then it finally came to me, Second Coming.
Oh, love that. Yes.
And it came out pretty good. And there's almost no me in it. I have a brief introduction, but it's basically just, trans women talking in their own voices about what it's like to have, have sex change surgery, quote unquote, down under, and then have to adapt to it. I mean, they tell us a little bit about surgery, but they don't tell us anything about how to adapt to it. And it's like, how do you do that? How do you learn to use it? How do you learn to feel it? How do you learn how to think of the vagina as a vagina? How do you, suddenly get intimate with people that, with an organ you didn't used to have? It's a whole, I think that's good sex for transgender people, I think, is a bit of an accomplishment. And we don't give it credit as such. And I think it's amazing. And I think it deserves study, not just for us, but also for cis people who are born with, any kind of genital deformity, or, soldiers who've had, groin IED wounds. There are any number of people who go through, kind of genital altering procedures. And there's very little study about this. And I think, it's something that deserves a lot of study and is really important, not just for trans people, but for the human condition. So I don't know if you want to jump in here, but I was going to tell how that led to the next three books, or you can jump in if you
Yeah,
want.
by all means, tell us about the other three books.
Just
Yeah.
keep running off at the mouth. Okay, I can do that. So, the next book I wrote is coming out May 28th. It's called Let's parentheses Not Talk About parentheses Transgender Sex. And it's coming out from Bloomsbury Publishing. Very proud of that. They did a great cover in shocking orange, which I really love. And that was kind of my own book on this. The first half is an exploration of why and how trans studies, and for that matter, queer theory, do not deal with sex, and what I think that means, and why I think it's a huge omission. I mean, trans people don't just, have sex and hopefully occasionally enjoy sex, but, sex can be an important way of learning your body. It can be an important way of connecting with it, an important way of loving yourself. It's a place of resistance, in a world that's trying to beat us to death. Having a really good wank off can be one of the few self-affirming things you can do that no one can really stop. And I think it's really important to start looking at this, not just, I'm making jokes about it, but not just as a source of pleasure, but also, what sex means for us, as because the connections between sex and gender are so deep and intertwined. And this is one of the weird things about the field. We keep treating sex and gender as separate, and we can have a whole discussion about that. But, sex and gender are not separate. They're deeply intertwined. They were never separated, except for political purposes by the modern LGBT movement. And it's just ridiculous that trans studies has talked about one and not the other. So that kind of became the first half of the book. The second half, I realized I couldn't just critique the field without doing what I was telling the field it should do. So for better or for worse, the second half of the book is just me talking about my own struggles with my own sexuality and what I had to go through, which is pretty extensive because I'm a pretty messed up individual, even on the best of days, and in good sunlight. And it's just kind of me talking it through, like everything I talked in the first half of the book that I said the field doesn't do. So it's not just me pouring out my little erotic heart, but hopefully also including a little bit of critical distance. So that was book two. I was at a panel at the Trans Studies Conference on this very topic. I thought I'd be a big deal to do a panel on, or to do a presentation on why trans studies doesn't talk about sex. It turned out I was on a panel, which irritated me. I wasn't even the person facilitating it. That was the wonderful Florence Ashleigh, who has been writing about sex. God love him. And it turned out there was a second panel on more or less the same topic. So all 6 of the 8 of us were sitting around bitching after our panels. And I just looked around and I said, this is an anthology. Why don't we just do an anthology on this? We need a transgender sexuality reader. And so most of them said yes, and a bunch of other people climbed on, and we put together what's going to be called, hopefully, the Transgender Sexuality Reader. And it's some really good early pieces by people like Jacob Hale and Susan Stryker, and for that matter, Leslie Feinberg, some of the stuff in Stonebush Blues and so forth, and Lou Sullivan's early writings. But then the rest of the book is all newer voices talking about all the different flavors and varieties of transgender sexuality experience. And it's something that they're calling autoethnography. It's not just, porn lit. I mean, erotica is great. We need that too. But that's kind of not what I was after. And it's not just capital S sexuality theory, but it's something at the intersection of the two of them where you talk about your personal experience, but you also talk about it from a theoretical perspective and analyze it with some insight. So here's the last part, and thank you because you're letting me kind of run off at the mouth here. So one of the people I met was this just amazing individual named H. Howitt, who I just couldn't stop talking with. I'm sure they were tired of talking with me. They had written a dissertation, and it's really amazing by itself because they have no master's training at all. Kate Bornstein recommended them to a college who said, okay, well, let's write a dissertation. The dissertation, you can still find it online, is called How We Fuck, Intimacy as Method. And they didn't just do a whole, is it exegesis? I never sure how to pronounce that word. Exploration. Anyway, how trans people actually fuck. That's the second part of the book. The first part is they construct this very elaborate methodology for studying and interrogating how transgender people have sex and how you do that without somehow strip mining people's most intimate experiences for the greater glory of academia. And the work is just brilliant. I mean, if there ever is a subfield, and I hope there will be, on transgender sexuality, I believe that How We Fuck will be a founding document. So I kept saying, this is a book, this is a book. And they just weren't interested. I write books, it's not what they do. And I was, I have hunted Routledge like Ahab hunted the white whale for 30 years, and they've never published a book of mine. I was talking with them in the midst of being turned down for yet another book. And I said, I just got to pitch this book. So they said, oh, I'm not doing that, but you need to talk to this other editor. And so the other editor said, yes, we're waiting for a final green light, but it looks like the powers that be have passed on it. And they've changed the title, of course, because I don't think you can put a How We Fuck on a popular book. H was just not in great health at the time. So I ended up editing the whole thing down. So I'm credited as editor. So there really is, again, no Ricky and me in that book. I put a little bit of introduction on it to say how wonderful it was and how incredible it is. But it really is a whole kind of roadmap for how to study and interrogate transgender sexuality. And it's just one of the most amazing documents. It's really a privilege to do it. So I don't know when that's coming out, but it's coming out from Routledge, and I didn't write it.
Amazing.
So those are the 4 books. And just to wrap this up in a ribbon, what I'm really hoping is, well, 2 things. First of all, I'm hoping I never have to write about transgender sexuality again, because 4 books in 1 year is absurd.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done with it. But the other thing is, I'm really hoping that at some point we get out of this an actual subfield on transgender sexuality. It's too important to not write about. And I will just say that, I love TSQ. Transgender Studies Quarterly is the premier place for trans studies. They're now, in their 11th year? So they've put out, I don't know, 40 some, I'm assuming 40 some publications at this point have come out. And there hasn't been a single one on transgender sexuality.
Oh,
Not
really?
one.
Wow.
Not one. In fact, their first one was on transgender embodiment, and it skipped right over G. There was all alphabetized. There were little 86 monographs. It skipped right over G for genitals and S for sex.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they just won't deal with sexuality, and it's nuts.
Yeah.
So maybe the field will finally start to wrestle with this stuff.
On the topic of embodiment, that's something
I'm
that's...
sorry, this is actually my interview. If you want to talk, you should get your own interview. I can connect you with people at What the Truth.
Honestly, no,
They told me I was going to have an uninterrupted monologue for several hours.
That's just kind of the way we do things around here sometimes. If we know that there's someone that's clearly got a lot that they can say on something, we're we'll defer to the person that...
I'm sorry, there was no quick way to put that all into the record. So haven't done it. I will be quiet for the rest of it and just let you talk from now on.
You're so fine. One of the things that you just touched on there was the sort of the notion of embodiment, right? And
Yes.
the as an action, a state of being, all of that. How do you see sex as part of embodiment for trans people?
I think it's one of the most critical parts. I mean, especially for those of us who go through, physical gender changes. I mean, we've been taught to say that it's all about my gender identity. It's because I want to be who I am. And it's yes, it is because of who I am, but let's face it, a lot of us also undergo various kinds of surgeries and hormonal adjustments because we want certain kinds of bodies to fuck in certain kinds of ways. And, and there is a materiality, alas, to the transgender body. It isn't entirely fixed, but it's definitely there. And, different kinds of bodies fuck in different kinds of ways. Different kinds of genitals allow for different kinds of acts and different kinds of eroticizing of the body and all different kinds of sensations. And we don't all just have it because these changes because of, you know, our gender identity. That is certainly a part of it. It certainly was for me, but part of it was I just wanted to be fucked by women. And the
Yeah.
disco stick kept getting in the way. It was an irritant. Sorry to the trans men out there. I realize that just makes no sense at all. But you know, for me, it was just like everything. The mechanics were all and the aesthetics were completely wrong. I could do sex, I could have sex, I could come from sex. I could not enjoy sex. And you know, these are the messy realities of down under that we don't talk about. You know, having surgery and for some people getting hormones is an important part of that. For others, it isn't. I get there are people who have, and by the way, no offense to people who still have the disco stick and, you know, just are able to, I'm talking about trans women here because it's the only thing I have knowledge of, and, you know, are able to instantiate it as like a, you know, a large clit and enjoy it that way. I tried for years. It did not float my boat.
Mm.
Could not do it. So, you know, different strokes for different folks, but that's what it was for me. But gender changes are also about how we want our bodies to be seen by others and eroticized by them, and how we want to eroticize and understand our bodies ourselves. And you can't just tie that up and say, oh, it's all gender. It's not gender. It's also about pleasure and sensation and intimacy and the kinds of bodies we want to have, and frankly, the kinds of bodies we deserve to have.
Yeah.
I'm a little pissed off about the whole gender identity only thing, as you can tell. I'm kind of getting over it at this point. I mean, I've written about gender identity and I continue to do so, but it's like, folks, it's time to deal with the fact that trans people have bodies.
Yeah, for real. We really should.
A quick content warning. The next question is about asexuality, but the answer moves into discussion of trans people facing sexual abuse. If you want to avoid that topic, skip to 1 hour, 12 minutes and 6 seconds.
I am curious in this though, where asexuality fits into this conversation about embodiment and sex. I feel like the book does a really good job of breaking that down, but I'd love you to explore that maybe a bit here.
Asexuality?
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because I was just reading a book on asexual eroticism, which I thought was a contradiction in terms.
Mm.
And there's one of the authors actually is in the studies reader. And it was just a fascinating idea to think about asexuality as a form of eroticism.
Mm.
I think there are probably many of us who go through periods of our lives where we are asexual because our bodies are just, you know, don't work for us the way we want them to. And some of us, because our bodies function, but our minds still can't deal with it. And some of us, frankly, because we've been abused and our bodies are just not a safe place to be. I went through that for quite some time. And I don't want to buy into the idea that asexuality, I was corrected in reading this book, that asexuality is a phase on one's way to, you know, happy erotic activities that involve intercourse. It can be an end in itself. Some people are asexual and that's how they express their eroticism. But it's not something we deal with a lot. And I think it needs to be recognized that asexuality is also an important part of trans experience. I also want to say that one of my pet theories, and I hope to do a book of interviews on this at some point, it'd be very interesting rounding up the cohort, is I can't prove this, but my gut level instinct is that something like a half to a third of transgender people have been sexually abused. I'm guessing the third is probably for trans women and the half is for trans men, because especially when we're young, we are confused about our bodies. We are used to keeping secrets about them. We are desperate for some kind of connection. We are often emotionally transparent. We are often cut off from our families. And if there is a sexual predator swimming in the waters nearby, the thrashing of a genderqueer kid is bound to attract them. And I think there are probably epidemic levels of sexual assault in this community that we don't talk about either.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure a book of interviews is going to get it done, but you know, it's kind of on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Just to interview, you know, survivors of sexual assault. I did a book called Healing the Broken Places, another interview book on trans people and addiction, which I think is another hidden epidemic we don't talk about. And was another snowball sample, so I can't say it was, really good sampling technique. But again, basically about half of them have been sexually abused. One of them had been abused by almost everybody, an uncle, a cousin, even their fucking dentist when they were under. They were a young, small-framed trans man stuck in a feminine body at that point, and they were just a target for everyone. We have very little social capital. There's almost no one we can run to and say, hey, I was molested, because people already don't believe us about our gender identities. Why would they believe us about this? And why would we feel safe telling them? Right? I believe it is an epidemic that we need to break the silence on. So anyway, and I don't know how I got from asexuality to that, but I think that is part, I think that is part of the puzzle of talking about transgender sex, is also talking about sexual abuse and asexuality. And also disability. Something else we don't talk about is, transsexuality among there. I didn't read the whole thing cover to cover, but I was looking for something around sex when TSQ put out its trans crip lit issue. And I don't think I saw anything. And I know that my crip friends have sex, but again, we don't talk about that. Maybe because we're talking about subaltern issues, but that's a really important issue and it deserves more attention. I don't know that I got.
It changes a lot. Like, as I'm disabled, and there's oftentimes, if I'm with a person that I've not been with many times before, there's normally a conversation where they're like, are you sure you can? And I'm like, it's fine, trust me. Like, I know my body and my boundaries, because inherently hearing the word disability and then thinking about sex and often what that entails, I think a lot of people inherently assume you can do a lot less than you can, or that it must, look and be totally different, or that, it's kind of it is something that is so often spoken about in ways that I think are often quite detrimental to the actual communities, right?
Well, I will just make a minor correction there. I'm not a person with disability. They are often spoken about by those of us who are temporarily able.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a secret in the community, but I think those of us who don't get it and are outside often, kind of assume that, people who are in some way profoundly or visibly physically disabled somehow are asexual.
Mm-hmm.
And it ain't true.
Yeah.
It ain't true. We just means we don't talk about it. We don't think about it. Doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think there's, trans experience runs the gamut of human experience. And I think that I love writing about Judith Butler. I've written books about Judith Butler. It ain't the be all and end all. We've got to, at some point, get out of the theorizing and get into trans people's real lives.
Yeah.
And I remember
definitely.
actually, it was an article on TSQ where they talked about, people's real lives, like, washing machines and doing the dishes and, finding a spouse. And it's like, at no place in there did they mention having a good orgasm, jerking off. I mean, come on.
Definitely. And that actually perfectly leads into the next question that I have, because one of the things that is also explored is this notion, you've already spoken about it a bit in the interview so far, this notion of, the limitations to gender as a social construct and talking about it only in these terms. I'd love you to break down some more of those limitations as you see them.
I think we are over-focused on gender and we are under-focused on sex. There's endless discussion about trans people and gender. Why? Because it's what cis people find interesting about us. But we are sexual beings.
Yeah.
And we need to start talking about that. And I agree with that academic who said it'll be used against us. I'm quite sure people will find ways to weaponize it against us. At the same time, I don't think that's a reason to stay silent about it. There are too many of us. This is what hurt me about that couple. I just, after that conversation, I just kept thinking, it's been 50 fucking years and we're still ignorant about our own bodies because we don't talk about it. I mean, of course, this woman who was undergoing bottom surgery that month had not talked to the doctor, had not asked her doctor about what she could expect, had not talked about what she hoped to get. And he, of course, didn't ask her. nor did he discuss how his technique might or might not affect her ability to experience pleasure afterwards. It was just this complete silence. In fact, being what I assume was probably a white, straight, cisgender doctor, since it was in New York, his whole thing was creating, a good old-fashioned vagina that could accommodate a penis, which, was not, since her husband hadn't had bottom surgery, wasn't exactly the first thing on their list. That was on his list. And number 2 on the list was also how it looked. Now, how vaginas look is really important to some people. I don't want to diminish that, but that doesn't mean it was high on her list.
Yeah.
There was no discussion. He's going to change her genitals with a knife. And neither her nor he had any discussion about what that would mean in terms of her sex life for the next 50 years. That's literally insane. And you know what? There wasn't a single frickin' book out there that she could buy, that I'm aware of anyway, that would answer that question for her. Maybe Florence and Ashleigh's new book. Gender fucking could probably do it. But that's part of it, but that's just Florence. But I'm just saying that we just don't talk about it. This is crazy. We can't all keep running. We're all reinventing the same wheel. We're going through the same ignorances. We're making the same mistakes because we're not talking to us about it. That's crazy. I get that they don't talk to us about it. We got to talk to us about it.
The way you're talking about it, it feels somewhat similar to some of the issues that face intersex people, although that's often happening in even, I don't want to say more extreme ways, but it's often happening in ways that are when someone's even less vulnerable, right? If a trans person is having an operation, normally they've gotten to a point of being old enough to consent to that operation. That doesn't happen with many intersex people, but there's a similar notion of so many things happening to our body that we get very little say in, or we have such little knowledge of. And even if we were to go and try and find that information, it just, in so many cases, isn't there and hasn't been there for the longest time. I kind of want to change track and talk about some of your previous work. With you being the person that coined the term genderqueer, and with language being such a moving thing, I'm dying to know what your thoughts and feelings are, like seeing how it's grown and changed over the years as like a term and a thing that people use as language to relate to themselves and others.
Well, I should say, I am credited with that. Susan Stryker says that there was actually someone who used it before me, but she hasn't told me who or when. So I'll continue to accept it until proven differently. But if Susan says it, it's probably true. But I know I was the first person to publicize it, start using it a lot. But it's funny because I started using it and I immediately got attacked by this gay guy who said, Wilchins has ruined a perfectly good term like queer by attaching the word gender to it, blah, blah, blah. And the word kind of went away and I was using it a lot. It's the title of my second book with Joe Nessel and Claire Howell, Genderqueer, Voices from Beyond the Sexual Binary, which is an anthology. And it just didn't go anywhere. And I just thought it was a really useful term. I started saying it simply because I needed to join 2 different concepts. I considered myself queer, but not queer in the same way that cis gay people use it. And I just remember saying, frustrated, I'm a genderqueer. It just kind of came out. But then I remember being at the Creating Change conference, which, the National Task Force puts on. I guess now it's just a task force. But anyway, and I was using a stall and someone had stuck a Post-it on the inside of the door that said a genderqueer was here. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Someone's using that term. That's so cool. And then it just started showing up everywhere. And I remember being absolutely astonished that people were defining themselves that way. And then it kind of got completely out of control. And some intersex DSD folks who are putting out what I believe is the first anthology for that community let me write an introduction, and they were going to call the book Genderqueer. And I said, God, please don't do that. No, I'm sorry. It was completely wrong. It was a non-binary book. Oh God, thank God I corrected that. No, it was a book by NB people, and Montenegro, I believe they were from, of all places. And I said, God, please don't call it genderqueer. We don't have any books with the word non-binary in the title. This was years ago. No one knew what it meant. I said, please do not hide. Don't, as they say in publishing, don't bury the lead. And so I ended up writing an entire introduction about your question, essentially, what's happened with the word genderqueer. And I feel like a total idiot today because it's still in the book, but their publisher prevailed upon them and the title now has non-binary. So what people are going to open that book? It's like, why is Wilson's writing about genderqueer when this book is about? But they kept it. So, it just kind of took off a life of its own. So, we invent the words we need. I really wish I'd invented the word cisgender. I struggled for years with that and it came with various things that people started using, like non-transsexuals and stuff like that. But there really wasn't a good word. So that's a word I wish I had really invented.
It's interesting because I think this is a complete tangent, but it's interesting how I think sometimes we think of words as kind of developing and others are created, because I hadn't thought of the word cisgender as being coined per se, because it's got a very Latin origin with cis involved. But you make a very good point of like, yeah, there will have been a long period of time without that phrase, which is so important as a...
It's so hard to talk without and that's what happens when you develop new forms of knowledge, is that you end up needing new words. And there's so much in trans experience that we haven't named, and we still use, old kind of broken down, ill-fitting cisgender language for, even gender identity, which was, basically invented and popularized by Harry Benjamin, was really because they wanted, they were trying to figure out a way to talk about intersex DSD kids, and they needed to separate, the gender inside the head supposedly from the body. And then they started using it with what were then mostly female transsexuals. And it's like, these terms are not our friends, and they were not invented by people who got us or were us, and we really need to rethink our language and our whole epistemology, I think, from the ground up. I've actually written an article about this, which hasn't gone any place, but I presented at the Trans Philosophy conference they had a while back. But it's funny, like, there are so many experiences we go through that we do not yet have language for. And yet, if you look at, I did a whole little dictionary in the book, and Let's Not Talk About Transsex, of all the words we've invented. Trans people are very inventive in terms of coining language, but trans studies has pretty much ignored this kind of linguistic creativity, and in some cases appropriation, that we engage in, and still continues to use mostly what I think of cisgender language. I think that's a real problem.
Going back to the book, actually, what is one of the most surprising things, I guess, you found during your research and writing for this? Or books, I should say.
Well, there were two things. One was H. Howitt's developing this entirely thoroughly worked out methodology. And one of the things that they came out of that with was the idea of assemblages, that trans people create assemblages, what Jake Hale called years ago retooling your body. H actually presents a whole methodology for doing this. And it's funny because when I tried to sell the book to Routledge, I talked about the sex part, and they said, no, we're really looking for a methodology. I'm like, you're looking for what? Who the hell is looking for? It just happened. They said, well, that's great. So we can throw out the sex part. No, we want that part too. So it's funny. It just happened to hit, happened to be exactly what they're looking for. I mean, I don't know how many books there are on methodology for studying trans sex, but I'm sure I could count them on one hand. But the methodology was just fascinating. And I started thinking about all the little assemblages that I do. I mean, my sexual practices are distressingly vanilla, but there's still all kinds of little adjustments I make because, my genitals aren't factory issues. A lover of mine who was cis once joked with me that, my genitals should come with their own owner's manual, which is something that I often have wished you as well. But I think that was one big thing. And the other thing was the person who was a Salmasian. I thought I pretty much knew the field of transsexuality, but that sent me back on the internet doing a lot of reading and trying to understand what was going on out there. So that was, those were fascinating. Did I say that I hated that woman who could come just by thinking I think I already said that.
Yeah, you did. You did.
It would have been useful during this interview too, which is running surprisingly long. So, yeah.
Well, I guess we'll move on to the next question then. Having been involved in like so much direct action over the years, and with so many successes as well, which is one of the most amazing things about it. What do you think are the key factors needed to secure or ensure direct actions achieve their goals or affect direct change?
I would like to see more direct action by trans people. I mean, I see a lot. I see a lot of stuff going on the transsexual menace listservs. I don't see a lot of transsexual menace demonstrations. Yeah, I'd like to see us get in people's faces more. People used to call me in the old days and say, blah, 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 what do I do about that? I'd say, go picket them. And that was my answer to everything. Just go picket them.
Yeah.
Do it gently, do it nicely, put out leaflets, carry signs, but show up on their front doorstep. If you do that, the news media will show up and cover it most of the time. And you will get coverage and you will start to create a counter discourse. And besides, you'll feel a lot better about yourself instead of going to your keyboard and writing a really angry post on Blue Sky. We need to get out there, especially the kids. Years ago, I tried to create an organization for trans kids. It never got off the ground, but I still think it was the right thing. Trans kids are being attacked, but there is no organization still speaking in the name of trans kids. There are groups like the Trevor Project, which focus on suicide, and Glisten, of course, which does, school bullying and so forth. But they're really, as far as I'm aware, we still have no organization that is by and for transgender kids, and yet they are the ones directly under attack here in the US.
There is a direct action group called Trans Kids Deserve Better that is ran by trans
in the UK,
kids.
Though, that's not in the US yet, is
That's true. And I'm hoping
we
that
need it here. They're doing great stuff.
Yeah, because we've seen a big resurgence.
And getting undercovered and squished by the media that don't want to cover it. But
yeah.
I love that they're doing it, and they're doing some really inventive, brilliant stuff. I just wrote the first book-length critique of the cast review. And I think it was Ruth Pierce who said you really should put something in there about them. And I started reading about their exploits, which I was distressingly unfamiliar with. And I actually closed the book with, I give them the last page. But they're doing great stuff. I love it. But I mean, we don't hear about trans kids. We hear about adults talking about trans kids.
Yeah.
Trans kids have their own voices. And we need to find a way to put them front and center, and we haven't found that yet. And I realize there are issues with them being minors, yada, 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 privacy, but still.
I feel like the argument of their children often gets used in whatever way is most needed to ignore what they're actually saying and asking for, which I always have a particular issue with. I feel like this lack of presence for like specific trans demonstrations and whatnot in the US kind of leads into what I was going to ask you about next, because I was wondering, compared to how things were when you were much more like on the front lines of direct action and whatnot, I was wondering, how do you see the world treating trans people now? Do you see it as much different? Do you think much has changed, or same boss?
What happened to the softball questions?
I've got one coming up, I promise.
I want to go back to the question. I love the fact that we're doing street action in the UK by kids. I do think that we need to have a large, well-funded, multi-million-dollar, structured political action organization in the US and the UK that goes beyond. Street action is important. I'm not dissonant for anyone, but that's at some point not going to get the cake baked. It's just going to get into the oven. We need for gay donors and foundations to pony up a couple $1,000,000 to put this front and center. We need an organization that speaks for and by trans kids, I believe, and has trans kids on its board. And you can't put kids in charge. Obviously, you have to have adults because they can't sign papers, et cetera, but you can still make them half of your board and half of your staff. It's a whole bunch of things you can do. And I think it bothers me that we have not done that. And I'm not saying that the organizations out there haven't done a good job, but I would like to see an organization, for them, by them. How things have changed. Well, I'll give you, a couple different answers. When we held one of our first menace demonstrations in Chicago, it was Chanel Pickett who'd been killed and her apartment burned. We were in, I guess it's Daley Plaza with the big Picasso sculpture. And I remember flying in, I think, with Tony Bertinetto, and Nancy and Androni flew in. And we had the flyers and the posters. We didn't know who would come. And I think we got maybe a dozen people. And I mean, we leafleted the hell out of that. square. Straight press didn't cover us, but the gay press did. Windy City Times was there. We got pictures and everything. It was great. We were just, the whole point was just to try to get people to recognize that trans women, particularly women of color, were dying over and over every month, sometimes every couple of weeks, because no one was covering it, not even the gay press. So that's maybe 1999, 1997. I can't remember the actual date. So a couple of years ago, I was reading an article online about someone had called for a day of remembrance vigil. I think it was in Brooklyn. And they asked people to wear white T-shirts in honor of all the young, mostly trans women of color who had died. And they showed a picture, and I think they got, I can't remember the exact number, between 6,000 and 10,000 people, all in white T-shirts.
Wow.
And I'm getting chills.
Yeah,
I just
that's
stared
a
at
lot.
that picture for a long, long time. The other story I can tell is in 2016, when we were at what turns out to have been the high point for trans rights in retrospect, at least in the US, there had been a spontaneous national boycott of the state of North Carolina over a fairly routine anti-trans bathroom bill. The first Black woman to be Attorney General had gone on national television to announce that the DOJ was suing the state of North Carolina, but in a personal and very unusual and emotional personal address for an Attorney General, turned to the camera and said, we see you, which is amazing. I actually got tears in my eyes when she did that. And I turned to my wife and daughter, who was like 9 at that time, and said, we're finally normal. It's the same daughter who had asked me if she could start calling me daddy at school because she was getting teased by their kids. This is in Washington, D.C., which is not exactly, bumfuck Louisiana. And I said, no, but I said, this is it. We're finally normal. So I wrote a book about the huge successes of transgender people and the transgender rights movement, and how inclusion in the LGBT movement had given us all kinds of power and reach that we could never have dreamed of. And we're scattering the forces of evil everywhere. And, the book was right. It was just ill-considered. I mean, we had kind of, quote unquote, defeated or taken on, gay rights, which didn't want us, and feminism, which didn't want us. TERFs were completely, in retreat. We had taken on often hostile media. The media was finally showing us respect. What we didn't realize at the time was we hadn't taken on the Christian right, which was about to become the most powerful force in American politics. I mean, they now control the White House, the House, the Senate, and they've put 6 people on the Supreme Court, or 5. And they were about to train all that firepower on us. So we've had huge losses. We are, bloody, but we are unbowed. And I believe eventually, we're going to come back. I have something on my Blue Sky feed at the very top that I'll read if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It says, take away my pronouns, my passport, my prison cell, my hormones, and my bathroom. I'm still trans. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. And tomorrow there will only be more like me. I'm not scared. I'm fighting mad. You can't have my life. It's mine. Because we are what the future of gender looks like. And I still believe that. I'm not trying to minimize the horrendous things that have happened to trans people in this country, especially trans kids and our friends in the UK. But we have also taken the worst punches from the most powerful forces in the country, and we are still standing, and we will come back. And there will be more of us tomorrow, because we are what the future of gender looks like. I was talking with a friend of mine who was really depressed about this, which I'm not saying I blame her, I don't. And I said, I'm going to give you $1,000, and you have to bet the money. You can't keep it. She said, what's the bet? I said, in 20 years, we get together for coffee. I said, which way do you bet? They won, and we're all locked into strict binary gender roles, and everything's done by birth assigned sex. Or we won, and gender is more fluid than ever. All these stupid laws and policies have been struck down. And there are about 20 new flavors of genderqueer out there that you and I never heard of. And there are more trans people than ever. Which way do you bet? She said, I bet that we win. I do too. We are the future. And there's no way you're going to get the gender toothpaste back into this tube.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are going to take over the world. It just doesn't look like it right now. So when I started transitioning in 78, I was in Cleveland, which at that time was about 1.5 million people. And I think there were only 2 other transsexual women. There were no trans men anybody knew of in Cleveland at that point. Now trans people are everywhere. Half my daughter's friends are trans or genderqueer. I mean, it's like people don't get how far we've come.
Yeah.
The problem wasn't taking, hormones away from trans kids, because trans kids weren't getting medication until Norman Spack, I think, opened the first clinic in 2007 in the US. Tavistock was already seeing kids in the UK, but they weren't giving them medication. So, trans kids weren't in sports because, I played high school football. If I come out to those guys as trans, they would have made a grease spot of me on the shower room floor. People forget how far we've come in 50 years. Not to say that we're not hurting now and these things aren't real pains. They are. But we've made enormous progress and we're not going back. And one day this will all be behind us.
I feel like you've sort of already answered the next question that I had, which is...
Well, I try to anticipate you at all times.
Dodging and weaving. Well, I'll say it anyway in case it jogs loose a different answer. Is there anything you feel generations of trans people today may be missing in how we work towards liberation, or any advice for us?
I'm going to get hate mail on this one.
Oh.
Less keyboard activism, more in the flesh activism.
No, I agree with you on that one. I'll back you up on that one.
And you can share the hate mail. I'll send some of it to you.
We do live reporting of protests, so if we aren't pro-protest, then what are we doing?
It's really important. What happens online is real and is important, but it ain't the be all and end all. Get out of the chair, get out of the street, go out and do something. I still do not know, 2 years into this fucking backlash, why there hasn't been a transgender march on Washington.
Yeah.
And I will gladly fly over to see my little British friends in the UK if you guys want to have a transgender march on Buckingham Palace.
Oh yeah, we well, not Buckingham Palace exactly, but we do a trans pride, a specific trans pride every year that last year got 100,000 people, and it's a march through the entire city, and it's amazing. It's so just real and raw, and I love that because it feels like the other pride option that you get in like big central London is so corporate. It feels almost offensive to human sensibilities in most regards.
It also forced them to cover it. It was so big, the news media couldn't black that out because it was too fucking big. And by the way, I was in Paris, God, it must be 5 years ago, and we blundered into a gay pride parade, and it was a nothing burger. Nobody gave a shit. No, it wasn't a big deal to Parisians. They just didn't care that much about trans people. And well, it's gay people. It was gay and trans. But it was like, I loved, we walked with them for blocks. It was very happy. It was very festive. But, here it's this big political statement. And of course, it still is if you're trans in the UK. But in Paris, it was another parade.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, people fuck, whatever.
There was nothing insubordinate about it because no one was uptight about, queers. It was fascinating to me. It's like, where are the counter protesters? Where's the police presence? Where are the cops? There was nothing. There weren't even mounted cops. There was nobody. It was just walking through the streets randomly. It was such a bummer. It was boring. It's bad enough being trans without being a boring trans person.
At least give me a riot shield to aim at or something,
Yeah, I think you guys need to bring over the 100,000 person march. I still would like to march on the palace because that would freak out the constabulary, but
yeah. Yeah.
No. They'd probably make us into the bad guys, but that needs to happen over here. How that hasn't happened, I do not know. We should be out in force with trans kids in the front of the fucking march, saying, we are here. Kids can't really know their gender identity because they're too young to really understand, unless, of course, they happen to be cisgender, in which case we should believe them 100% of the time, because of course they know who and what they are. It's like, fuck you.
Yeah.
You know, we always thought that kids can't really know that they're gay when they're 3 or 4 or 5 until we found out they do.
Mm.
Well, kids know when they're 3 or 4 or 5 when they're trans, many of them.
Yeah.
And they're not going to change, baby. That ship has sailed.
The final question we have a segment on the podcast that we always end with, called Trans Joy, where we just have people submit things that they have found give them joy. I know. It is anything and everything, but what do you find is the most like affirming thing for you out of all of this?
You know, it's funny because I was just reading on Assigned Media a whole article on trans joy. And of course, there's that website, We Happy Trans.
Mm.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
This has not been a source of happiness.
Yeah.
It's fucking miserable. I've fought with it every day. It dominates my life. Gender dysphoria is still always in the back of my mind. I'm going to die with a certain amount of gender dysphoria.
Mm.
I mean, I'm sorry to be depressing to people, but this is not fun. The other part of it, you know, I have to tell you, I see people, kids who have gone on blockers and then hormones and had more or less mostly normal cisgender, well, I can't say cisgender anymore because they're trans, but trans cis childhoods. And, you know, and I wonder what would my life have been and what would I have looked like? And I'll never know.
Mm.
And I am sometimes crazy green jealous about that. At the same time, I have found community, I found meaning. I mean, I write books. I write books because this is meaningful to me.
Mm.
If I wasn't trans, I don't know what I would have been. Maybe I'd still be a programmer on Wall Street writing code or something, or letting AI do it for me now. But it has also given my life, you know, meaning and depth and connections that I wouldn't have had.
Mm.
So would I say, oh, I love this experience? No. It's tough going through gender confirmation surgery. It's tough going through, at least for me, you know, going through a full second puberty at age 30 with the whole cisgender world not only watching, but commenting on it. None of it's any fun, but it is meaningful. There's a number of studies that have all found the same thing. People who don't have children reliably report being happier with their lives. But people who do have children, although they say they're less happy, also report that it's more meaningful.
Mm.
And I think that's pretty much about it. It didn't make me happy, but it has been extremely meaningful. When I look back, you know, when I'm going up to that big dog pound in the sky, I will the things that I look back on and say, well, you know, it was worth it, are almost all the things that I've done with and for the trans community. And I don't regret any of that. And my life would be the poor without it. But has this been a walk in the park that I think everybody should have it? No. I wish I could say that. By the way, I wrote an article, you can still find it online, that generated like a whole mini circus of people countering it and criticizing it and critiquing it and trying to pick it apart. It was called Transgender Dinosaurs. And I said, you know, imagine 50 years in the future when getting blockers and then hormones and then surgery, for those of us that want, you know, the full physical, the full Monty, as it were, is routine. And I said, you know, all the people who look like me, you know, because I'm kind of tall and rangy and, you know, I wouldn't say exactly masculine, but, you know, masculine androgy. And all the trans women who are like me will be gone, or almost all of them. And all the people who had childhoods like me will be gone too. And we will be like these transgender dinosaurs. Everything I know growing up, the kind of stigmatization that I had to go through and all that stuff, and waiting until I was an adult to transition and then facing all that shit. And remember, I'm talking 50 or 100 years in the future, that will all be gone.
Mm.
The standards of care will win. Every kid who wants them will have blockers and hormones and surgery, when, you know. And I thought, we're going to be dinosaurs in our own community. And all the things that I think of as being part of trans experience will not be definitional of trans experience anymore. They won't even be in the center. They'll be on the periphery and the fringes of, you know, where the revolution hasn't caught. And I'm still kind of like thrown by that idea, you know?
Yeah.
So I guess that brings me back to my original point, you know, we will win. We will have the bodies we want and the bodies we deserve. And we're not going anywhere. We're going to be bloodied, but we're not unbowed. We are unbowed, and we are going to win this thing. And one day there will be a brighter dawn. It hasn't happened yet, and it will happen in Turf Island. I promise you, sooner or later. I know it seems impossible because at least in the US, we have two parties, and one of them, God help the damn Democrats, have actually stuck by us. And in the UK, Labour and the Tories seem to be battling it out for who can be the most transphobic.
For real, seriously,
gay PM and reform waiting in the wings, and they're to the right of Putin when it comes to trans people. But I believe eventually people, even in the UK, will realize the damage they've inflicted on trans kids. The academic studies are coming. They haven't published enough of them. They haven't been soon, but they are coming. And all that crap in the Cass review, it's all being overturned, and all the things they're saying, all the bullshit about detransition and that stuff. It's all going to be gone.
Well, that's all of the questions that I have. Is there anything else that you feel like saying or sharing?
No, thank you for having me. I think the world of What the Trans. I think you guys fill a very unique and important part in the transmedia ecosystem. Thank you for the hard and often thankless work that you do. In fact, let me thank you for doing it.
Thank you for being here.
I would love to do it anytime.
So, pretty good. Excellent work flying solo in an interview there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Viridian was there also because in part, a lot of the initial questions that were more directly tied to specific bits in the book were questions that Viridian had as well. So both of us were there, but Viridian was like, I'm going to hang back from being a voice on the pod, but I still wish to be there, and it was very helpful with getting things set up and whatnot. So thank you, Viridian. It was a very interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it.
When I was listening through to it, there were like a few points, like, because I make notes about this shit. So I'm just going to run through my notes, if that's all right.
Go for it.
Yeah. So that book title that she talked about, The Second Coming, awesome title. Excellent. Love that.
Yes.
Also talking about asexuality, and well, lots of trans people go through periods of asexuality, you know, maybe while transitioning and kind of anxious about, you know, putting themselves out there in a sexual or romantic way. Anyway, going through a period of asexuality definitely does gel with my own experience and the experience of one of my partners. Is that something that you've found? Do you know, like, have you met anybody that's kind of been through that, do you think? Or
I know people that are asexual. I've had periods where it's been a struggle for me, but that's always been much more trauma related. But I also think that there is inherently some things about being trans in an environment where being trans is like not even an option that you get to recognize sometimes until later in life. I think there's a lot about the amount of invalidation that trans people go through from, you know, the second that we start being able to recognize and consolidate our identity and who we are, that likely hampers one's want to engage in sexual activity, either with themselves or with other people. The way that my transition has affected my like sex drive and the way that I engage in intimacy is a very interesting conversation that I've had predominantly with myself and with partners. It's also something that I don't really see much beyond people going, yeah, HRT really helps kick up the want. I think that that's great, but I think we can probably do better. We can have a more nuanced discussion, and I'm so glad that this book is here for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that leads us on neatly to that point that she made about that kind of lack of partially literature, but really conversation about sex as a trans person, particularly when dealing with medical people, medical authorities, and that they'll tell you, here's what your vagina might look like, and here's, you know, the depth you'll have, blah, blah, blah. But what they don't talk about is, here's what's to bear in mind having sex. Here's what you might want to consider having sex. And just as a funny story, a friend of mine who has relatively recently had surgery at the tail end of last year, had basically a catastrophic wanking accident, flicked herself off one too many times.
Oh no, flicked it off! no.
Yeah, so flicked herself off one too many times and was in so much pain the following day she couldn't go to work. So,
Oh, bless. Oh,
got to be careful when you're healing up, folks.
yeah. Yeah.
Not to say you shouldn't do
Well.
it. You should find your limits, but try and rein it in so you don't have a catastrophic wanking accident, which is the name of my punk
Yes.
name of my punk band. So she also talked about she'd written a book-length response to the cast review. Sign me the fuck up. I will read that shit.
Please. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Getting slightly into the not darker, but less overtly comedic territory, where she talked about sometimes feeling jealous about younger trans people getting more or less the right puberty, and me too, buddy, me too. Talking about the transgender experiences, not necessarily fun, but definitely meaningful. And yeah, it is, because the kind of bonds that you make with people, like the bonds with my partners and friends here, but also with you and everybody else involved in What the Trans, that's not something that I'd be experiencing if we were cis, right?
Yeah. I cannot picture a world where I'm cis, because so much of my life would be so fundamentally different,
right?
That I might as well be asking if I was an alien. The world is so deeply constructed towards gender that for me to be able to imagine a world where I'm cis isn't really possible. I'm normally, and I would say that most times when we're thinking along those lines, we're normally thinking of, what if I was the recipient of more privilege?
Yes.
Which is not the same thing as what if I was cis.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Last couple now. So she talked about like transgender dinosaurs and us kind of being out of the picture 50, 100 years from now. And there are so many different genders and the whole construction of it is different. And I know I won't be here to see it, but I cannot wait for that future to exist. What a wonderful place that must be. Because, as she said, and as I know I've said enough times, even if not necessarily feeling it in my heart while saying it, but we are going to win in the end.
Yes.
That in the end, definitely doing a bit of heavy lifting, but on a long enough timeline, we are going to win. Because this thing that we're experiencing now, this anti-trans crusade, particularly here in the UK, is a backlash. It's a backlash to a thing that was happening in the sort of early to mid 2000s, the trans tipping point, apparently in 2014, when Time magazine had Laverne Cox on the front cover. All of this that we're experiencing now, it's a backlash. Backlashes die, they fade. I don't know how soon, but one day soon, certainly on a galactic timescale. All of this will be different. People like us won't be suffering. And I can't wait for that day. Even if I'm not around to see it. It was jolly nice of her to compliment the podcast at the very end there. So thanks, Ricky. Love you, babes.
Yes. Welcome back anytime, especially if you've got a book length. I mean, considering we've just had a whole review of Cass be so disappointing, by all means, I trust you more than I trust the BMA at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Once again, really nice work on the interview. You're welcome back anytime, Ricky, darling. Mwah.
Oh, and if you want to get the book, that is again, Let's Not Talk About Transgender Sex, The Erotic Erasure of Trans Desire and Sexuality by Ricky Wilchins. It will be available in a couple of days' time. Go get it.
May 28th. And now, let's ask each other what you asked Ricky right at the end of the interview there. Let's talk about some trans joy. Starting really quickly with Olivia. Finally got my first GIC appointment in my calendar, early July, after waiting since 2018. Oh, and knowing that no matter what the EHRC guidance gives, I'll be camping with my ladies group, getting drunk this long weekend. Yeah.
Yes, love that. I'm going to be playing some D&D this weekend. Maybe out in nature, maybe not. Who knows? Anyway, Clickable Aaron says, my neighbour taught me how to do my makeup in preparation for Pride this weekend. Congratulations, yay!
Fabulous.
Oh, well, I say congratulations.
I mean,
yay, happy Pride times!
Yeah, for sure. But that's still, like, your first Pride is not something you sort of forget. I mean, it might not be your first one, but, like, your first one with that level of makeup, perhaps, in that sort of mode of presentation. Yeah, that's...
And your neighbour being really sweet as well.
Yeah,
and That's community. That's love.
That's
Love
nice.
that.
That's girls protecting girls. Shauna says, I am currently sat in my hospital bed 1 day post-bottom surgery. A surreal feeling. Yes, I can only imagine.
Congratulations.
Don't wank too hard.
Samantha Duke says, first anniversary of my vaginoplasty was wonderful. My partner took me to Montreal and we both had an amazing time. Got to catch up with a couple of friends I hadn't seen since I was in the convalescent ward following surgery, wander around the city, and as a taco aficionado, eat several of the best tacos I've ever had in my life. Great time, great celebration of my new life, wonderful partner who probably knows me better than I know myself. And then there was a picture of a Leonard Cohen mural included, which is lovely.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a beautiful time. So wonderful.
Rachel says, today marks 1 year since I started HRT. Congrats, Rachel.
Congrats! I think it's actually been about a year since I've been on HRT. I've just realised we're in...
It's late May, yeah, 21st.
Sick. Charlotte says, I heard my partner's mother using my its pronouns when she had no reason to think I could hear her, and it makes me feel very yippee. And that's great. I'm glad.
Yeah. It's nice to know that people are using the appropriate pronoun when you're not around. Hydramez says, I did my final laser session yesterday. Awesome. It's nice to be finished with it.
Lana TQ says, I'm halfway through electrolysis after 12 sessions of facial laser. It's been a while and a lot of money, but getting there slowly.
Jessica the Transmetal Alchemist with... That's such a cool name. The start of June will mark the 9-month anniversary since I got promoted to assistant department manager. Fantastic. Doesn't give any information as to what the job is or where it is, and nor should it, obviously. But yeah, that's great. Nice milestone for getting promoted into the good life.
Yeah. Hopefully your boss is also a transmetal alchemist. Anyway, Ashleigh says, having a gorgeous date with my hot as fuck boyfriend after doing a house viewing together. Very happy that I get to be me and that I get to be with him. That's so sweet.
Yeah, it's really nice. Love it. Mayukachu says, we're actually getting stuff done for Pride. I've got a night out tomorrow with a bunch of supportive people and a meeting Saturday morning. And yeah, that's how it works. If you're not hungover for like an activist meeting type thing, are you even doing Pride?
Yeah, right. And speaking of Pride, I Am Olivia says, this Saturday is Trans Pride in my town, Falmouth, and I'm really excited. So, yay.
Yeah, it's Pride season. It's Pride season. And
it is. It's now happening.
I will say it's Pride season because people in the UK are calling it Pride Month for June, and it's not Pride Month. That's an American thing. That's some American cultural imperialism bullshit, right? It's Pride season because Manchester Pride doesn't happen until the very end of August. We've got Prides happening all the way through June, July, August, and some into September. So
yep.
It's not just 1 month.
We own the summer now. We own the entirety of the summer and the spring. Get with it. Get used to it. It's ours.
It's ours. Yoink. Alice, proper Nico, says, I'm prepared for the laurels. My friend has been there yesterday and is going to get treated with meds and surgery. Salute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inchfit says, today I had a math exam and now the rest of the exams are nice. Philosophy tomorrow and the teacher or the subject are very nice. Great, that's groovy.
Spooky Erin says, vaguely trans-related joy. I ordered KT tape to use as trans tape, which works amazingly, but it also occurred to me only recently that I could use it as regular KT tape too, and with some experimentation, I've found out how to use it for my joint pain. It's really helpful.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yes. And Kiraskuro says, tonight I am going to a soprano and violin concert adapting the words of Kafka. But is it trans joy, you ask, doing the eyebrow thing? It's Kafka, hun. Kafka. You know, from the Bug Story. And I agree, Kafka is trans as fuck.
Hell yeah.
I will not elaborate on this.
Nope, no need to. Just check out Metamorphosis. And finally, Melissa says, it's nice to be, to my knowledge, the first elected trans councillor in the northeast of England. It's been a wild couple of weeks, and I'm sure there will be many more. Fantastic. Congratulations, Melissa.
Congratulations, Melissa.
Woo!
I'm so glad and so happy for you. I'm glad that there's someone out here doing the right fights.
Yeah. I know there's a good few trans councillors. Yes, we're going to cancel you because we're the trans cancellers. No, I know there's a good few trans councillors around in the UK, and I know that because there's a few of them that are in the Green Party, and I find out about stuff like that.
And we have a wonderful little bit of trans joy that comes from a What the Trans alumni. Previous editor of the pod, Ben, wrote in with this wonderful bit of news that we're just going to share with you. If you need a snippet of positive trans news, my game Trans Theft Horsaw just won grand prize at A Maze Games and Playful Media Festival in Berlin, which is about the biggest thing that a weird/art house/indie game can get in the European festival scene, and a boon for a trans story. It got a good laudation, which is the introductory speech when they announced the winner, ending with the words, "This game reminds us that, as right-wing policies are on the rise, it is a radically political act to create queer joy. Long live gender gladness." Lots of trans folks at the festival were very enthusiastic about the game too, and after the award ceremony seemed full of gender gladness. For some reason, games, festivals and conventions, etc. tend to attract a lot of trans folks. And this festival was the first time I've ever been outside of the UK in a quarter century, but I'm extremely glad that I went. So yeah, that's phenomenal. That's fantastic. Congratulations, Ben. I'm so gassed and I'm so excited. I'm so desperate to play your game, generally.
So, that's it. Thank you all very much for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks. You can find us, of course, on the social media. We are on Facebook for our sins, but our main sort of content distribution platform is Blue Sky, but we're also on Instagram, and now it's summer. There's going to be plenty of Pride events at which photographs will be taken, and you'll find almost all of those on our Instagram, so would recommend signing up to that. And obviously we're on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts from, be that Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. If you're listening on Apple Music, please do leave us a positive review. It's really helpful for us there. Thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you in we'll speak to you in a couple of weeks, and toodaloo.
Toodaloo.
This episode of What the Trans was written and produced by Flint, Sammy and Ashleigh, and presented by Ashleigh and Flint. It was edited by Amber Devereaux, with our opening theme music created by Warrett Sarah Yui Karlberg, and our episode thumbnail artwork was created by Opoa Piers. We would especially like to thank our producer-level Patreons, who are Alexandra Lilly,
Andrea Brooks,
Anubis a Jackal,
Ariadne Pena,
B Squared,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Bernice Roust,
Bex the Mermaid,
Brandon Craig,
Break the System,
Carly Silvers,
Cassius Adair,
Kellen York,
Claire Scott,
Clara Volume,
EA Games.
Crazy Richard,
Cindergosa,
Daniel Hardwick,
Dan Oblivion,
Dave Murphy,
D,
Dr. McGee,
Elizabeth Beth Anderson,
L. Gray,
Ellen Meller,
M. Seth Brattain,
Eric Widman,
Erin Carlson,
Irresponsibility,
Fiona Punchard,
Flute Punk,
40 funny furries forever fighting fascists. 40 funny furries forever fighting fascists. Hey!
Gorstar,
George Simmons,
Georgia Holden Burnett,
Grabbalicious,
Hazel Dust,
Heather Paterson,
Heidi Reardon,
Helen _
Immy,
Jem Hoskins,
John,
Jordan Starr,
Kai Lewin,
Karakan 12,
Katie Cox,
Katie Fenn,
Katie Reynolds,
Kiki T,
Lara Bailey,
she goes,
Lauren O'Nions,
Lee Downs,
Lentil,
Levi Hart,
Lex Phoenix, hello sweetie,
Lanus,
Leah Story,
Melissa Brooks,
Melissa Harker,
Michael Jajo,
Mika,
Monsieur Spirel,
Murgatroyd,
Mixophon,
Naystrom,
Name,
Namida Aniskans,
No Art,
Needles and Threads,
Nick Ross,
Ontologically Unjust,
Asheen,
Patreon User,
Rebecca Prentice,
Ren,
Roberta DePrunk,
Root -1,
Laws Absolute,
SAP,
Sabrina Artis,
Samantha Raven,
Sarah,
Selena B.N.,
Setcap,
Sean Phillips,
Siobhan Fergus Evans,
Sky Killane,
Sophie Lewis,
Stella,
Tanya B,
Ted Delphos,
The Socialist Party of Great Britain 1904,
The Splund,
Tig Slater,
Tin Roof,
Toby,
Trowan,
Vic Parsons.
and Willow_Tree. Thank you all. We'll speak to you in 2
Thank
weeks.
you all. Cheers. Bye now. Bye. Bye. Watch out.